Hey everyone, thanks so much for stopping by. For the card today, the focus for this one is the liquid masking that I'll be using for this project. And I'm also going to be bringing in this stamp set. This stamp set is by Craftin Desert Diva. This one's called Seasonal Fairies. My plan for today is to use my Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. So I've got some good quality watercolor paper. This one is Canson Montball cold press 140-pound watercolor cardstock. So here's how the marker works. I've pumped it a few times and it's ready to go, and then you just draw like a marker. The liquid pours right out, and all you have to do is apply a thin layer across your project that you want to protect from the watercolor. I have a stitched rectangle die that I use to cut out a piece of cardstock or the watercolor paper, and then I'm using the Tim Holtz stamping platform to align where I'm going to place my images. And then using the Versa Fine Onyx ink, I stamp those down. And because watercolor cardstock tends to have those grooves in them that makes them great for watercoloring, they're not typically take the ink too well. So you do have to stamp a couple of times. I think I ended up stamping about 3 times to get a nice outline of my images. Once I had set the images to dry just for a few minutes, I'm taking my marker and I am just coloring over my images. I'm trying not to go over any one section too many times because I want a nice even layer over the entire image to dry. And then I will do both of the fairies using the Molotow Liquid Masking because I do want to protect those from the watercoloring in the background that I want to do. Once I cover both of those, I do let the panel dry. I think I set it aside for a good 10 minutes or so to let that liquid masking dry completely so that I can color right over it. Okay, so now my panel is ready to go, and I've scribbled out one of the colors that I'm using to create a rainbow. I've just scribbled it out onto a mat, and then I'm picking it up with a damp water brush. Paintbrush, I think that's what they're called. So I'm going in kind of a rainbow order, but I'm not using the typical colors you would see. For my red, I chose pink. I excluded orange, and I think all the other ones are in the rainbow order. Now I go back and forth between scribbling onto that mat and picking it up with my brush, and then there was a couple of sections where it was just a little too light, so I used the marker directly onto the wet paper and scribbled it on there, and then softened out any harsh lines with just my damp brush. And I'm able to go right over that masking. There was none of the colors transferred under. It was perfectly fine. So I typically will leave my panels to air dry. I find that it minimizes the paper warping, and I also find that the colors stay a little more vibrant. Now you can totally use your fingers and rub the masking away. It would peel right off. But I just happen to have this masking eraser or adhesive eraser, I think it's called. And that really made it easy just to kind of erase that masking away. Every now and then there would be like a clump of the masking that's on the eraser that I would peel off just in case it wanted to get stuck back onto my project. Once I had all of that masking off, I was ready to color in my fairies. I did speed this up to about 4 times the normal speed. I only wish I could color that fast. But I did leave this in, and I did list the markers that I used down across the bottom. There was one part, and I may have cut it out, I'm not sure, but this first fairy that I'm coloring, what would be her wings got colored in as if it was part of her dress. So the only thing I did to fix that was I took a clean brush and I dipped it into water, and then I kept going over what would be the wings to take the color away. Eventually I faded it out enough, and I just covered that area with some sparkle just to make it look like it was wings. So anyway, I will turn some music on while I color, and we'll finish the card at the end. Okay, so the coloring's done, the panel's dry. Again, I left the panel to completely dry on its own without heat setting it. And then I'm going to start working on the sentiment. Now my daughter totally picked this stamp set out and the sentiment, so this is how I chose to incorporate it. I'm going to have the sentiment as if it's coming out of the bottom fairies. I think it's a flower. I'm not sure if it's a wand or a flower. So anyway, I'm adding some of that anti-static powder. I've got the panel inside my Misty, and I'm going to again use VersaFine Onyx ink to stamp that down. And I'm just wiping a little bit off because the way I had it aligned, some of that black line would go right over the image. So I just took a clean baby wipe and wiped off the part that I don't need it stamped. And again, being that it's a watercolor panel, I had to stamp it off a couple of times. And then I'm going to heat set that with some clear embossing powder. And then to give just a little stability to that panel, I took a piece of fun foam and I'm measuring it out so that it goes on across the entire panel. And then I can just trim off what I don't need. Trim off a little more, and then I can line that up and adhere it to the panel. And then I'm taking some black cardstock and I'm adding the mat to the panel, and then I'll take my paper trimmer and I can trim off the edge of a couple of those sides. And then I added it to a white card base, and just for a little bit of sparkle, I'm adding some clear, I think they're sequins. I'm sorry, I made this card like 5 days ago and a lot has happened since, and I just don't remember what I did, and I can't find it to look at it. Anyway, that is my completed card. I hope you found it inspiring. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I will see you next time.